Welcome to the Lion's Tears Ministry. This is Reverend Liz Jackson. Today's sermon is Reality. Enoch tells us what space really is, heavens and the abysses. NASA means to lie, part 2. As a recap, NASA, your space agency, means to beguile in Hebrew. Enoch tells us what space really is used for and why so many civilizations worship the same star constellation. There is a reason we are told not to study astronomy. Enoch tells us that space is both the heavens and the abyss, or one of the abysses, and that stars are angels. The constellations are those of the fallen angels fixed into place until the day of judgment. The sermon is going to tell you more about NASA and the history of NASA while keeping in mind what we are told in Enoch. This is going to use research outside of our Bible as evidence, and it's time to wake up now because NASA was founded by the occult and uses Nazis that took part in killing millions of people in World War II. Most of the information will be taken from NASA's very own website. As a reminder, Genesis 3:13 states, "And the Lord God said to the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat." The Hebrew word beguiled me is H5377, and it's Nasa, spelled N-A-S-H-A, pronounced Nasa. And it means to lead astray, mentally to delude, or morally to seduce. To mentally lead astray and to morally seduce, these are the traits of NASA and the rest of the world governments. When you take out the H again, you get NASA or NASA, which again is how you pronounce Hebrew word H5377 as NASA. So I pray you understand that I'm not the only one who knows the truth. Many are out there, but are laughed at and called conspiracy theorists. Again, how can something be a conspiracy when it can be proven? Enoch 18:12-16 states, "And beyond that abyss I saw a place which had no firmament of the heaven above, and no firmly founded earth beneath it. There was no water upon it, and no birds, but it was a waste and horrible place. I saw there 7 stars like great burning mountains, and to me, when I inquired regarding them, the angel said, This place is the end of heaven and earth. This has become a prison for the stars and the hosts of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire are they which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord in the beginning of their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times. And he was wroth with them, and bound them till the time when their guilt should be consummated, even for 10,000 years. So how did we get lied to by NASA? This is going to be in a timeline of events format. And at the end of this timeline, I will have questions that I asked and researched to help understand how NASA has lied to us, because science proves other science, and you have to have some common understanding of what chemistry does and just simple things, and you'll be able to understand in the way Abba Yah showed me to help you understand by the time we are finished. So in 1915, NACA is established. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, was a federal agency founded on March 3rd, 1915 to undertake, promote, and institutionalize aeronautical research. On October 1st of 1958, the agency was dissolved and its assets and personnel transferred to the newly created National Aeronautic and Space Administration, or NASA. In 1923, Walt Disney founded Disney. On October 16, 1923, Walt Disney and his brother Roy found the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio in Hollywood, California. The studio, now known as the Walt Disney Company, has had an oversized impact on the entertainment industry and is now one of the largest media companies in the world. Did you know that Walt Disney was a demoulet? And this is taken from demoulet.org. If you don't know what the demoulet is, it is a quote-unquote secret society or brotherhood. The demoulet.org states, did you know that Mickey Mouse was a demoulet? Well, in truth, Walt Disney was a member of the demoulet and knew Dad Frank S. Land very well. He was the 107th member of Mother Chapter and joined in March of 1920 at the age of 19, just as the demoulet program was taking shape. He was one of Dad Land's boys. By this time in his life, he had already dropped out of school to get a job selling candy and magazines on the train that ran from Kansas City to Chicago at the age of 15. At the age of 17, he couldn't get into the Navy or the Army, so he went to France and served as a Red Cross ambulance driver during World War I. Fearless behavior for a very young man. Walt Disney is important later on. In 1936, JPL, or Jet Propulsion Laboratory, is founded. In 1936, students at the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory of the California Institute of Technology, also abbreviated GALCIT, directed by Dr. Theodore von Karman, began design and experimental work with liquid propellant rocket engines in the Arroyo Seco just outside of Pasadena, California. After the Caltech group's successful rocket experiment, the Army helped Caltech acquire land in the Arroyo Seco for test pits and temporary workshops. Airplane tests at nearby air bases proved the concept and tested the designs for new jet-assisted takeoff rockets. During World War II, the GALCIT rocket research project developed solid and liquid propellants in units to assist the takeoff of heavily loaded aircraft and began work on high-altitude rockets. Reorganized in November of 1944 under the name Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the facility continued post-war research and development on tactical guided missiles, aerodynamics, and broad supporting technology for U.S. Army ordinances. A person of interest we need to understand and learn about is a man named Jack Parsons, also known as John Whiteside Parsons, and this is from wired.co.uk, and states John Whiteside Parsons was an American rocket engineer, chemist, and Thelemite occultist. Associated with the California Institute of Technology, Parsons was one of the principal founders of both the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Engineering Corporation. In 1941, with his first wife, Helen Northrop, Parsons joined the Agape Lodge, the California branch of the Thelemite Ordo Templi Orientis, or better known as OTO. And again, this is an occult society. And our next bit of information to back that up comes from freeze.com, where author George Pendle, on his biography of Jack Parsons, the scientist, the mysticist, and the follower of Aleister Crowley, wrote a book and is now, or was in 2002, a dramatization on CBS. Mr. Pendle states this: in 2002, Freeze published an essay by George Pendle titled Strange Angels. Taking readers back to pre-war LA, Pendle told the bizarre but true story of John Jack Whiteside Parsons, the audio-dictate rocket scientist who worked and laid the foundations for space travel. Parsons' life formed part of a strange Phonicon network that linked the Edwardian occultist Aleister Crowley to himself and the maverick genius of America's cinematic avant-garde, Kenneth Anger, and not to mention other artists as Marjorie Cameron, George Herms, Bruce Conner, and Wallace Berman, the actor Dennis Hopper, sci-fi writer Robert Heinlein, and the future founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. So again, when you go to study this, you can go to freeze.com, and the link is provided on here, or just Google search Jack Parsons and the occult, and it'll pop up with Aleister Crowley. In 1954, Disney works with Werner von Braun to make 3 sci-fi movies about space, and this is taken from nasa.gov. As you will read, Werner von Braun was a Nazi German who the USA spared. Jules Verne's science fiction had inspired Werner von Braun when he was young. Years later, von Braun designed the famous World War II V-2 rocket for his native Germany, but he also dreamed of developing vehicles that would propel artificial satellites and men into outer space. In fact, his interest in developing rockets for space exploration rather than for defense angered the Gestapo and led to 2 weeks in a German prison. As World War II ended, von Braun and other German rocket experts surrendered to Allied forces and eventually immigrated from Germany to work for the U.S. Army. Initially assigned to Fort Bliss, Texas, the von Braun team was eventually transferred to Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. On January 31, 1958, the von Braun team used a modified Jupiter C rocket to launch Explorer 1, America's first orbiting satellite. 2 years later, von Braun became director of NASA's new George C. Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, where he and an expanded team would develop the Saturn rockets and launch men to the moon in space in 1969. Von Braun served as a technical advisor on 3 space-related television films that Disney produced in the 1950s. Together, von Braun, the engineer, and Disney, the artist, used the new medium of television to illustrate how high man might fly on the strength of technology and the spirit of human imagination. According to David R. Smith, director of archives at Walt Disney Productions, von Braun caught the attention of Disney senior producer Ward Kimball. The Collier series had appeared about the time that Disney decided to use television to promote Disneyland in California. The theme park would include 4 major sections: Fantasyland, Frontierland, Adventureland, and Tomorrowland. Disney producers would incorporate ideas from Disney fantasy films like Snow White, Pinocchio, and others to promote the first area of the park. Again, on nasa.gov. In 1955, Man in Space. Man in Space is a fascinating and rare 1955 Disney program exploring humanity's obsession with the cosmos with equal parts scientific futurism and historical investigation. So here they are, you know, a decade early, implanting these ideas into the public's head. And that is what they do. They take their thoughts and program, that's why it's called television program, into our minds as to what it is that we should be believing and focused on. And I'm sorry, I will never take the words of a Nazi or anyone who has killed millions of people ever in my life. 1958, Project Mercury. Initiated in 1958, completed in 1963, Project Mercury was the United States' first manned in space program. The objectives of the program, which made 6 manned flights from 1961 to 1963, were specific: to orbit a manned spacecraft around Earth, to investigate man's ability to function in space, and to recover both man and spacecraft safely. In 1961, conducted between Project Mercury and Apollo, was Project Gemini. It started in 1961 and concluded in 1966. The Gemini spacecraft carried a 2-astronaut crew, 10 Gemini crews, and 16 individual astronauts, flew low Earth orbit, or LEO, and that is another word you need to keep in your mind. Low Earth orbit missions were flown at this time in 1961, during 1965 and 1966. Why was Project Gemini important? Before Gemini, NASA had limited experience in space. The Mercury missions had proved astronauts could fly in space. But before people could land on the moon, NASA had to learn many things. It had to learn what happened when astronauts spent many days in space, and it had to learn how astronauts could go outside a spacecraft in a space suit. It had to learn how to connect 2 spacecrafts together in space. Going to the moon would require doing all of these things. Before Gemini, NASA had not done any of them, and Gemini proved NASA could do them all. And again, that is taken from NASA's own website. 1958, NACA is renamed to NASA. Again, on October 1st, 1958, the agency NACA was dissolved and its assets and personnel transferred to the newly created National Aeronautics and Space Administration. In 1966, film director Stanley Kubrick meets with NASA and author Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke, who is an author, wrote 2001, A Space Odyssey. It is loosely inspired by Clarke's short story, The Centennial, and him and Stanley Kubrick worked on this together. The Centennial was Clarke's short story, but it became a novel while he was collaborating on a screenplay with Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick approached Mr. Clarke about writing a novel for the express purpose of making the proverbial good science fiction movie, and the novel was still being written while the film was being made. This resulted in one of the truly unique collaborations in media history, again taken from NASA's own website. There is an asteroid named after Arthur C. Clarke, as well as a dinosaur that was discovered in Australia. So on the website, on the ministry, you can see that there are film directors, Stanley Kubrick meeting with Arthur C. Clarke and other NASA astronauts and advisors and project administrators in 1965. So shortly after 1965, they meet up with NASA and make 2001 a space odyssey. Again, it's all about programming. NASA continues to say, this meeting that left Kubrick to build a space-age world unlike any other. After surveying sets designed from other 1960-era sci-fi films, Kubrick decided he didn't want to leave 2001 scene in the hands of the film industry artists. He wanted a more realistic setting. He assembled a skunkworks team of astronomical artists, astronautics, specialists, and production designers. Aerospace engineers, not prop makers, designed switch panels, display systems, and communication devices for the spacecraft interiors. Hans Kirk Lang, who worked as an illustrator in NASA's Future Projects Division, modeled 2001: A Space Odyssey's spacesuit on NASA's, using the same horizontal stitching to maintain a constant volume of air. They resembled a slimmed-down Michelin Man. Likewise, drawings of the Discovery's control panels were based on NASA's photos showing astronauts huddled around an undeveloped Apollo space capsule. And that is some information from Wired magazine. So here we have, during the quote-unquote space race, astronauts having time to develop movie sets. And I laugh very hard at this because common sense says that there was not a space race. If these scientists and advisors and administrator like George Mueller, who is the senior administrator on the Apollo project, has time to meet with a film director about space, you can't tell me that it was all hands on deck and they were working around the clock to get a man up to the moon, because this was only occurring in 1966, 1965, 1967. Here we move to 1968. The movie 2001: A Space Odyssey was released. And again, this is on nasa.gov. And NASA states, Kubrick and Clark began collaborating on what would become 2001: A Space Odyssey in April of 1964. Using Clark's 1951 short story The Centennial, along with other inspirations as source material, the two worked on the film's screenplay and an accompanying novel in parallel. Kubrick wanted to make the proverbial good science fiction movie that touched on man's relationship with the universe. Of course he did, because it's about programming, and it's not about the relationship with Abba Yah. It's about what they want you to believe and taking the Lord God Almighty and our Creator out of everything. So you need to understand that from 1968, when 2001: A Space Odyssey was released, which takes place in 2001, from 1968 to 2001 is 33 years. 33 is a number associated with Master Masons and Freemasonry, and not only just Freemasonry, but the Scottish Rite. And Buzz Aldrin was and is, if he's still alive, a member of the Scottish Rite and is a 33-degree Freemason. Do you all remember what happened in 2001? Well, I do. I was pregnant with my oldest daughter in 2001 when the Twin Towers were bombed. All you need to do is Google search Twin Tower Explosion 2001 Demon Faces, and you will see that Evil was released on that day, which is exactly what they were broadcasting to you in the form of space and movies throughout the 60s. Again, we have to remember spirit realm manifests in the physical, and that all spirits, good, bad, whatever, have ways of communication. And if you know how to discern information using Abba Yah and his spirit, and he helps you, then you can understand and perceive things differently. So here's a brief rundown of the Scottish Rite, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Compared to the 3 degrees in standard Freemasonry, the Scottish Rite, an offshoot of Freemasonry, has 33 degrees. The 33rd degree is a supreme honor bestowed only on those who have demonstrated outstanding service to the Brotherhood, as well as professional and personal accomplishments. In 1968, the Twin Towers were being constructed. Do you see how this all ties in together now? The lead architect for the project was Minoru Yamasaki, and construction began on August 1968. The towers were destroyed in September 11, 2001, in which almost 3,000 people lost their lives. In 1969, Apollo 11 claims to land men on the moon for the first time, and this is from nasa.gov. Apollo 11 launched from Cape Kennedy on July 16, 1969, carrying Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Buzz Aldrin into an initial Earth orbit of 114 by 116 miles. An estimated 650 million people watched Armstrong's televised image and heard his voice describe the event as he took one small step for a man and one giant leap for mankind on July 20th, 1969. President Nixon calls the men from the Oval Office while on the moon from a landline. So my question that arises out of this is, what is space? Space is a vacuum, so it generally doesn't carry sound waves like air does here on Earth, though some sounds do exist in outer space, we just cannot hear them. But the various probes zooming through our cosmos are capable of capturing radio emissions from space objects. Radio is a form of electromagnetic radiation, just like light, and can therefore travel through the vacuum of space just fine. The astronaut's transmitter converts the sound wave to a radio wave and sends the radio wave through space to other astronauts, where it is converted back to sound for other humans to hear. So how are radio waves converted to sound? This is from nasa.gov. You can tune a radio to a specific wavelength or frequency and listen to your favorite music. The radio receives these electromagnetic radio waves and converts them to mechanical vibrations in the speaker to create the sound waves you can hear. General Dynamics are responsible for creating this S-band transponder in 1962, which is a new system that would accurately track the Apollo spacecraft, transmit and receive telemetry signals, communicate between ground stations and the spacecraft, and provide the link for the historic broadcast from the surface of the moon. The formal contract was awarded in 1963 to Motorola's Government Electronics Division, which is a legacy company of General Dynamics. So it was originally awarded to Motorola, but General Dynamics states that they began developing the S-band transponder in 1962. So when looking up the history of General Dynamics, one would think that landing on the moon would be listed as a major event. However, I have a photo from their website, and it is not listed at all. What is listed is this: 1952, General Dynamics is formed through the combination of the Electric Boat Company. 1953, it acquired Convair. In 1954, USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear power submarine is christened at Electric Boat. 1959, General Dynamics merges with Material Service Corporation. In 1976, Canadair sold to the Canadian government, and in 1982 acquired Chrysler Defense. General Dynamics Land System is formed. So again, taken from General Dynamics' own website, they mention nothing about helping people go to the moon. I keep looking and I found that in 2001, they purchased Motorola Integrated Systems. Motorola Inc., Government Electronics Division in Scottsdale, provided key communications to the Apollo 11 mission. General Dynamics purchased the Government Space Division of Motorola in 2001, and General Dynamics Space Tech operations are still based in the city. I then wanted to know what the definition of a legacy company was, so I asked and I learned that the legacy companies always look towards the future and what it will mean for the business. So according to Motorola from MotorolaSolutions.com, they state a Motorola S-band radio in the Apollo command module provided the crew's only communication link with Earth from beyond 30,000 miles away. This is a large number, keep that in mind. The small unit produced by the Motorola Government Electronics Division required only 35 watts to communicate with Earth from the vicinity of the moon, which is less power than used by a refrigerator light bulb. So common sense question time, brothers and sisters. If this is all true, why do we have to have cell towers? Why does everyone's cell service still go in and out? Why can't we enjoy our cell phones without the need of towers? And why do I still, after all, it's 2021, drop calls wherever I go in St. Louis? If they can, quote unquote, receive and transmit from the moon 30,000 miles away and use only energy less than your refrigerator light bulb, I should have cell service all the time. Next, Buzz Aldrin, Freemason. And this is taken from the ScottishRite.org, and it's on Buzz Aldrin. You might know him as one of the first men on the moon, but we know him as the first Mason on the moon. Brother Edwin Eugene Buzz Aldrin Jr. was an active Mason and is a member of Clear Lake Lodge number 1417 AF and AM in Seabrook, Texas. He was born January 20th, 1930 in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, and attended the United States Military Academy at West Point, graduating third in his class in 1951. Brother Aldrin later went on to receive a PhD in astronautics from MIT in 1963. He served in the Korean War and is credited with 2 enemy fighter kills during his tour. Aldrin also carried a handmade silk Masonic flag with him on his space journey, embroidered with the words Supreme Council 33 Degree Southern Jurisdiction USA. After his mission on September 16, 1969, Brother Aldrin visited the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. and presented the flag to Grand Commander Luther Smith. The flag is now located in the archives of the House of the Temple. So again, I am not going to rely on anyone from Nazi time who killed millions of people. I'm not going to rely on those occultists who formed NASA, and I'm surely not going to take the word of a Mason. So back to our timeline. 1969, Apollo 12, men go back to the moon. 1971, Apollo 14, and 15 claimed to land men on the moon. In 1972, Apollo 16 and 17 claimed to land men on the moon. In 1981, MTV or Masonic television is born. We were never allowed to have cable growing up, so I didn't really know what MTV was until I got older, and I do thank my parents for that. But on Saturday, August 1st, 1981, at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time, MTV was officially launched with the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," spoken by John Lack and played over footage of the first space shuttle launched countdown of Columbia, which took place earlier that year, and of the launch of Apollo 11. MTV is housed in a Masonic temple, and you can Google that. So do you now see the ties again with Freemasonry and your television programming? If not, let's keep going. NASA states they lost the technology and cannot go back to the moon. Don Pettit, USA NASA astronaut. And this you can find on YouTube or also on nasa.gov. Donald R. Pettit was selected by NASA in 1996. The Silverton, Oregon native holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Oregon State University and a doctorate in chemical engineering from the University of Arizona. Prior to becoming an astronaut, he worked as a staff scientist at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, New Mexico. A veteran of 3 space flights, Pettit served as NASA's science officer for Expedition 6 in 2003. And Donald Pettit, says, "I would go to the moon in a nanosecond, but the problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore." Again, Don Pettit, USA NASA astronaut, telling us the truth, because truth is no one's been to the moon. NASA destroyed tapes, and this is by NPR. An exhaustive 3-year search for some tapes that contain the original footage of the Apollo 11 moonwalk has concluded that they were probably destroyed during a period when NASA was erasing old magnetic tapes and reusing them to record satellite data. We're all saddened that they are not here. We all wish we had 2020 hindsight, says Dick Nefker, a TV specialist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, who helped lead the search team. So why would NASA erase tapes? NASA, when they're receiving billions of dollars? Here's a budget starting in 1958. So I'm supposed to believe that they couldn't purchase tapes and had to erase actual footage of the moon landing when we have a museum all over the world with different things in these museums, such as fossilized bones and ancient history, but we don't have the actual tapes of the moon landing. Again, there was no moon landing. So we're going to dive into this more. Published by The Guardian, NASA's budget, and there is a PDF available on the ministry website where you can see the full spending budget. But I took out segments, and it has a title called outlay, and I didn't know exactly what outlay meant, but outlay is defined as an amount of money spent on something. NASA's budget increases after 1968, so again, why would they erase tapes to save money? They had plenty of money to buy tapes. In 1968, NASA spent $4,722,000. In 1969, NASA spent $4,251,000. In 1979, NASA spent $4,380,000. And in 1989, NASA spent $11,036,000. So you can't tell me that these were accidentally erased to save money when I can clearly see with my eyes that their budget continues to increase. And again, the PDF file is available on the ministry website. So what is low Earth orbit and why can't we leave it in 2021, but we could in 1969? And by the way, when I was typing this, my internet went out. And I always take these things as a sign because the Lord God knows that I'm trying to get people to understand and see things in reality. And the demonic spirits, they don't like that. I have a lot of spiritual things that happen when I tell the truth that the Lord God Abba Yah asks of me. So here we go. Then God said, let there be firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so, and God called the firmament heaven. So in the Mayan, Navajo, Inca, Norse, Celtic, Chinese, Egyptian, of course Hebrew, and Hindu cultures, they all believe in a firmament. And that is why no one has ever left low Earth orbit. What is low Earth orbit? According to universitytoday.com, technically objects in low Earth orbit are at an altitude of between 99 to 1,200 miles above the Earth's surface. Any object below this altitude will begin to suffer from orbital decay and will rapidly descend into the atmosphere, either burning up or crashing on the surface. Objects of this altitude also have an orbital period, the time it will take them to orbit the Earth once, between 88 and 127 minutes. However, beyond 620 miles, objects will be subject to Earth's Van Allen radiation belt, a zone of charged particles that extends to a distance of 60,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. In these belts, solar, wind, and cosmic rays have been trapped by Earth's magnetic field, leading to varying levels of radiation. Hence why missions to low Earth orbit aim for altitudes between 160 to 1,000 kilometers, or again, 99 to 620 miles. According to NASA, how far away is the moon? NASA states 238,855 miles away from Earth. PBS.org says if this space study is right, humans have never left Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere is described as a fragile coat wrapping around the planet, comparable in scale to an apple skin protecting the fruit. From more than half a century, even before the Apollo 16 mission captured the first ultraviolet images of Earth, researchers knew that the outermost atmospheric layer, the geocorona, extends far beyond the denser surface level air that we breathe. Now, a new study from Space Physics redefines the boundaries of our planet based on overlooked data collected at the end of the last millennium. The report concludes that the edges of the Earth's atmosphere actually extend more than 391,000 miles from the planet's surface, about twice as far as our moon. So, which is it? PBS says that our moon is further than 391,000 miles, but NASA says our moon is an average of 238,855 miles. You can't have it both ways. Either you know how far the moon is or you don't. And two people or two organizations cannot accurately state how far the moon is. That's a problem for me. That's red flag. I don't like lies. So let's continue. What are the Van Allen belts? Question I asked in Google. James Van Allen discovered a collection of high energy particle clouds within 40,000 kilometers of Earth. These belts have been long known as bad news for satellites and astronauts, with potentially dead consequences if too much time is spent with them. The Van Allen radiation belts were discovered in 1958 by James A. Van Allen, the American physicist who designed the instruments on board Explorer 1, the first spacecraft launched by the United States. He also led the team of scientists that studied and interpreted the radiation data. So, how hot are the Van Allen belts? According to Journal of Geophysical Research, Space Physics. Previous studies have shown that typically the temperature of the ion component of the plasmasphere is in the range of 2,000 to 20,000 Kelvin, and we're going to convert that here in just a moment. A question I asked NASA.gov: how long were the astronauts in the Van Allen belts? The astronauts were inside the fringes of the radiation belts for only about 60 minutes, which is an hour. So the next question I asked was, what type of metal was the Apollo 11 spaceship made out of? And this is from NASA.gov. It was made of an aluminum honeycomb sandwich bonded between sheets of aluminum alloy. The base of the CM or module consisted of a heat shield made of brazed stainless steel honeycomb filled with phenolitic epoxy resin as an ablative material and varied in thickness from 1.8 to 6.9 centimeters. So not very thick at all. If you know how to read a standard ruler, you know that 6.9 centimeters, not very thick. So how hot is the plasmasphere? The base of the plasmasphere, which is the same as the top of the ionosphere, is about 1,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. The temperature in the plasmasphere is generally between 6,000 degrees Kelvin and 35,100 degrees Kelvin, or very hot compared to temperatures we are used to. The plasmasphere has a very sharp edge called the plasma pause. So then my next question was, at what temperature does aluminum alloy melt? And this comes from Fire Resistance of Aluminum and Aluminum Alloys and is copywritten 2016 by ASM International, measuring the effects of fire exposure on the properties of aluminum alloys, all rights reserved by J.G. Kaufman. So I wanted to make sure that I'm not copywriting any of this person's, research. And Kaufman states, unalloyed aluminum melts at a temperature of about 650 degrees Celsius or 1,215 degrees Fahrenheit. It boils at approximately 2,425 degrees Celsius or 4,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Alloys of aluminum do not melt at fixed temperatures, but rather over a range of temperatures depending on their composition. For example, alloy 5456 with approximately 5% magnesium alloy constituent has a melting range of 570 to 640 degrees Celsius or 1,055 to 1,180 degrees Fahrenheit. Melting points begin at the lower end of the range and is completed at the higher end. The melting ranges for many commonly used aluminum alloys are provided in Table 1.1, in which I also have a photo of. And it talks about the melting range of alloys. So please investigate this stuff because it's going to blow your mind. They continue to say, for most of the alloys, strength after significant time at temperatures above 150 to 200 degrees Celsius or 300 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit are lower than those at room temperature, and the amount of the strength reduction may increase with both increasing temperature and or increasing time at an elevated temperature. As a result, most aluminum alloys are not usually recommended for long time service at or above these temperatures, but they are widely used in the temperature range from room temperature up to 150 to 200 degrees Celsius. So again, am I supposed to believe that the astronauts sat in the Van Allen belt for over an hour, not once, but twice, because they had to come back home and the ship didn't melt? Brothers and sisters, understanding the very principles of chemistry proves that they could not have gone to the moon. And the very laws of science prove that they didn't. An hour, 60 minutes, is a very long time. So again, on the ministry, I have a Kelvin to Fahrenheit converter. And this conversation proves that NASA didn't go to the moon and that they lied, because when you take the 2000 degree Kelvin that we read about earlier, it converts to 3140.33 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way above what the fire resistance of aluminum and aluminum alloys copywritten research tells us. Next, we convert the 20,000 degree Kelvin into Fahrenheit, and 20,000 degree Kelvin into Fahrenheit converts to 35,540.33 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, they could not have sat in the Van Allen belt. But here we go. This is from aerospace.si.edu, and they state the LM cutaway appears just as it would have during the moon landing mission. Several materials cover the spacecraft to protect its inner structure from temperature and micrometeoroids. Specifically designed materials maintain temperature balance inside the craft. Black materials on part of the LM are heat-resistant nickel and steel alloy, which are 0.0000833 inches thick and less than 1 millimeter. So again, I'm supposed to believe that they went through the Van Allen belt, which is a temperature of 35,540 degrees, 0.33 degrees Fahrenheit, and didn't melt. And then it continues to say, not metal foil, these plastic films are thinly coated with aluminum, which reflects the sun's heat and insulates the spacecraft. The thin gold color films are used in blankets of up to 25 layers. All the plastic films protect the spacecraft from micrometeoroids. So then my next question was, at what temperature does nickel steel alloy melt? And here we are again. Nickel at 1,453 degrees Celsius or 2,647 degrees Fahrenheit. Steel melts at 2,597 to 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Zinc melts at 787 degrees Fahrenheit. Nickel at 2,647 degrees Fahrenheit. Aluminum again at 1,220 degrees Fahrenheit. And cast iron melts at 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is from the meltingpointsofmetals.com. So again, two outside sources from NASA telling you that the spaceship could not have sat for an hour in the Van Allen radiation belts when we learned that the Van Allen radiation belts were, let's go back up to it. How hot are the Van Allen radiation belts? They range from 2,000 to 20,000 degree Kelvin. And again, when you convert those numbers, 2,000 degrees Kelvin converts to 3,140 40.33 degrees Fahrenheit and 20,000 degree Kelvin converts to 35,540.33 degrees Fahrenheit. You cannot tell me that they sat there an hour and the spaceship did not melt. So, when the government thinks you're stupid and don't care, they can do whatever they want, and they've been getting away with it for a very long time. The first sign of lies should have been obvious when they employed German Nazis. It's time to make up your own mind. What's going to happen is this. Abba Yah is coming back, and they don't want you to know that. Do you remember the Tower of Babel? Genesis 11:4-8 states, and they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they began to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. The things that they are building is called NASA and your lies, trying to reach heaven. The city that they are talking about, again, is Mystery Babylon. The mystery is this: it's the entire earth this time. And it's not just a localized town destroyed in Genesis. NASA cannot get to heaven, and it has never left Earth. Not now, not in 1960s or 70s. And I pray that you understand this, for Abba Yah is coming back soon, and it is time to wake up from the lies and follow your one true Creator.